Kia ora, good morning and welcome to this webinar focusing on the impact that COVID-19 has had on the shipping industry and the current market conditions for the logistics and shipping industry. I'm Patrick McKibbin and I'm the CEO of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, and we're very pleased today to be able to introduce Blair and Priya from one of our partners, 360 Logistics. They're a gold partner and a very great partner for the Hutt Valley Chamber and businesses across New Zealand. Actually, they operate in various places in New Zealand. So, 360 Logistics have had a long history here in Wellington. Their group is an independently and privately owned organisation that specialises in international trade, facilitation, and increasingly complex supply chain and logistics solutions for their customers. What sets 360 Logistics apart from their competition is their unique and innovative approach to managing the value chain of international logistics and the movement of goods. They believe that the value component of a robust supply chain lies in the ability to form and develop partnerships with like-minded businesses, both locally here in the Hutt Valley and globally. In addition to this, they take a holistic approach to working alongside their customers when developing solutions, taking into consideration different modes, the supplier's ability to meet deadlines, seasonal logistics peaks, border and commerce compliance. Even the value of goods to be moved or the ability to reuse import equipment for export shipments is designed as a true end-to-end logistics business model. In a nutshell, 360 Logistics do not accept that it always needs to be done in the same way. Blair Morgan, who you'll see in a moment, is the Wellington branch manager, and Priya Shama, who will also join us, is the Wellington Sales Manager for 360 Logistics. They will share with us some of the challenges the industry has faced over the last 12 to 18 months, and they'll talk a little bit about how this has affected the market conditions. We know from talking to our members that shipping, logistics, the cost of shipping, and many other issues around the logistics industry are one of the #1 issues that businesses have faced during the COVID period. And Blair and Priya are here to share their insight and knowledge with you all today. We will have a short Q&A at the end of the session, so please submit your questions via social media and we'll do our best to answer those at the end. I'm now going to hand over to Blair and Priya to take you through their presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for having us. So I thought I'd start by explaining, because a lot of our clients ask, how did it get this bad? I think it would be fair to say that the virus has revealed exactly how fragile and delicate the global supply chains really are. We're seeing empty shelves everywhere we go. And if you're an avid online shopper like me, everything seems to be out of stock right now. The crux of the crisis has been the unexpected peaks and troughs in shipping demand due to a whole host of issues caused by COVID-19 disruptions. Sadly, New Zealand has been one of the countries most impacted by the crisis. Not only are we an island nation heavily dependent on shipping, but we are also at the very end of shipping routes, meaning we experience all the delays from further up the line. I read an interesting article recently where New Zealand was perfectly described as the Stewart Island of the supply chain. It made perfect sense. COVID lockdowns all over the world resulted in activities being restricted, factories being closed and unable to collect containers off the port, leading to ports being at full capacity. Adding to this, the fact that most ports were also working with skeleton staff due to restrictions. With the loss in demand for shipping, most vessel operators reduced the number of ships en routes to stabilize costs. These effects lasted from March to June 2020. We also had governments all over the world reacting with lockdowns and stimulating consumption in the face of the pandemic. The UK, for example, set out a package of economic stimuluses in the summer of 2020 that was specifically designed to get people shopping. In the US, Stimulus checks sent directly to citizens resulted in a 4.2% month-on-month increase in consumer spending. Our own government responded to the pandemic with an extraordinary stimulus package, notably $12.1 billion. Additionally, we saw a shift in consumer spending from services, which we could no longer do, to goods. With many people stuck at home, we began buying more goods online. Everyone scrambled to buy their new desk for their home office. Then there was a run on furniture and flour and, should I mention, toilet paper. As lockdowns lifted, demand skyrocketed. This led to chaos for manufacturers and distributors of goods who couldn't produce or supply as much as they did pre-pandemic for a variety of reasons, including worker shortages due to COVID restrictions and a lack of key components and raw materials. Local manufacturing has also struggled to recover to its pre-pandemic levels, leading to a surge in imports. Different parts of the world have experienced supply chain issues that have been exacerbated for different reasons too. For instance, power shortages in China had effects on production, while in the UK, Brexit has been a big factor around a shortage of truck drivers. The US is also battling a shortage of truck drivers and large backlogs at ports, which I'll discuss a little bit later on as well. Container shortages also play a major part in some of the issues we are currently facing. So where are all the containers? Many are at inland ports, others piled up in cargo ports, and the rest are on-board vessels. The largest container shortages are currently being faced in India, Asia, and Europe. Not only did the virus put the brakes on imports and exports, it also meant empty containers were not being picked up. So a unique scenario developed. Asia, being the first hit by the pandemic, was also one of the first to recover. So while China resumed exports earlier than the rest of the world, other nations were still dealing with restrictions, a reduced workforce, and minimal production. A consequence of this was that many of the remaining containers in Asia headed out to Europe and Americas did not come back quickly enough. Compounding to shift in trade imbalances and bottlenecks is that production of new containers is woefully low. This limited access to available containers has also driven up buying price of new containers, since Chinese container manufacturers who dominate the market now charge $2,500 USD for a new container. That's up from $1,600 USD last year. Likewise, container leasing rates have rocketed up 50% in the space of just 6 months. I can't talk about this and not mention this incident. It may have been the source of hundreds of jokes and memes, but the Ever Given shipping container becoming wedged across the Suez Canal had a serious impact on global supply chain networks. Although the vessel itself was freed after just 6 days, the subsequent backlogs in traffic caused more than 60 days supply chain disruption. To give you some context, there were 62 container ships with a combined capacity of over 727,000 TEUs held up by the Ever Given, with further vessels delayed because they were taking alternative routes around South Africa. Another big issue is port congestions. Maritime port facilities are key to global shipping industry, which handles over 80% of all internationally traded goods. So port congestion and delays have wide ripple effects. The pic here illustrates the situation at the Yantian port in June this year, when the port was forced to close due to the virus. You can see its complete gridlock. While a partial reopening of Yantian took only a few days, a return to normal services took nearly a month to achieve, as the congestion spilled over to other ports. In October this year, 2 typhoons hit Hong Kong and Shenzhen. These delays ricocheted into USA, Europe, and Australasia. The point here is that even when shipping strains ease, this means new surges of vessels arriving at already congested ports like Long Beach, which all it does is shift the backlog to those destination ports. This is exactly what we saw with the Suez Canal incident. Consumer purchases of goods have stayed elevated in advanced economies, and labour shortages have stretched trucking, rail, and shipping liner capacity to their limits, creating bottlenecks of containers between the factory loading docks and store shelves. So what does this all mean? Apart from the delays in transit times, etc., the most significant result of everything we have discussed so far has been the increase of freight rates month on month and sometimes twice a month. As we know, price moves based on a balance of demand and supply, so it was inevitable that freight rates would go up. Before COVID-19, a 40-foot container out of China would cost maybe US $750. Now that same container will cost over US $9,000. If you compare the same situation with what we're seeing out of China to Europe, we're hearing they've hit over 20,000 USD for that same container. That's a more lucrative routing for the shipping lines, which is why they're routing so many of their ships that way. It's also important to note here that prior to COVID-19, freight rates were impossibly too low, with shipping lines making losses for several years. This also led to the amalgamation of many of those vessel owners, which further exacerbated the current issue, as there are now less players in the market. I'd like to now hand you over to Blair to discuss what we're going to see in terms of market conditions going forward.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Patrick and Priya. Patrick for the lovely introduction he gave us, 360, me and Priya, and also for giving us the opportunity to talk with you and share our knowledge. Priya, thanks very much for covering this topic to date. I think you've done a very good job there of covering it in depth. My focus is going to be more on the current market conditions and what they're looking like at the moment and where they're heading in the next month or so. Lately, we have become cautiously optimistic as rates have been fixed for a longer periods of time, and we've started to see some flattening off with issues around space. However, the supply chain right now is significantly more complex than it was before, and remains very fragile. It would only take one small thing to happen to result in a major slowdown in the supply chain or impact. An example of this would be a COVID case in a major port in China. Due to their strict regulations in China and no tolerance to COVID policies, this would result in lockdowns and delays and offloads of vessels in major ports. I have tried to break down the current market conditions into key trade lanes, starting with Europe right through to New Zealand, to give you an indication of what's happening in each particular trade lane. So as you can see by the attached slide that we have there, the COVID is currently surging in Europe. The infections in Europe currently are higher than they have been throughout the whole pandemic. And due to the introduction of the new variant that we've just seen in the news in the last few days, restrictions are likely to take place in the next few months, which will impact and slowdowns and create further delays into the future. Currently, peak season and space is very tight. 4 to 5 weeks to get a booking out of Europe is the norm. Several ports in Europe are experiencing equipment and storage and space shortages. Rates are still rising considerably due to the demand, and then we come to the issue of truckers. You will see this issue is faced in a number of the countries, including New Zealand, but currently the truckers in Europe are overloaded due to the lack of drivers and COVID slowdowns. Many are now increasing their charges to help cover the costs, which is of course being passed on to the customer. Vessels have been regularly omitting ports in Europe, which is also adding to the backlogs. And no clear end is in sight. Moving on to Asia. China has a lot higher restrictions and harsher restrictions than other countries, which can mean things can change really quickly in the market. Congestion at all transship ports still remains a major issue in Asia, Singapore, etc. An example of how some of the shipping lines are trying to resolve this, MSC are currently running 2 additional extra loaders to help clear this backlog, which is taking a vessel out of their service, which is creating more delays. So at the moment, we're trying to steer away from using MSC because of this. We have, however, noticed a few new players entered the China to New Zealand market, which has been great as this has created some competition and helped aid to the flattening of the rates. Unfortunately, they aren't currently calling Wellington at this stage, but we are hopeful this will happen in the future. Littleton was introduced to their schedule earlier this month, and we're hopeful that Wellington will follow in the near future. Also, feeder services in China have been flagged to be suspended in late December, which will affect the market through to mid-February. This is due to the rules around COVID quarantine for the vessel crews. And clearly, with Chinese New Year on the horizon, a lot of these members will want to be going home. So this will create a surge in shipments prior to this lockdown of these in this market, and could create overbookings and delays. No one normally gets surprised by this peak leading up to Chinese New Year. However, the harsh quarantine rules mean that shipping services will slow down weeks earlier than normal, and people will go through quarantine weeks earlier to get home to their families. Now moving on to the US and Canada. Congestion has not improved in Los Angeles. The graphic that we've got on the screen here shows that there's 87 vessels currently waiting outside port, and it's taking 7 to 10 days for a vessel to be unloaded upon arrival. How's this affecting New Zealand? Well, the weekly Long Beach service from Long Beach to Auckland is currently only working on alternative sailings every 2 to 3 weeks. There is no other alternative service that we can use that doesn't transship via Asia, which is only going to take us to the transship troubles that we discussed earlier. Also, this space that's being taken out of the market has added extra pressure onto other ports, Seattle, Vancouver, etc., which is causing delays in their services. Again, trucker shortages is a huge issue in the US like Europe. Congestion has hit the drivers' wages hard as there's fewer jobs available for them to complete. It's forced some drivers out of the market to pursue other employment opportunities. Truckers are also cancelling jobs on short notice due to COVID cases. Replacement drivers can't be found at short notice or are charging higher penalty rates. These extra costs are now just part of getting the job done in Australia and must occur to get and only getting passed on to our customers. Warehouse shortages, warehouse facilities are currently packed to the brim of retailers stockpiling. As everyone's been sitting at home buying things, they've decided to go down the lines of filling up their warehouses. This has created additional pressure on the local logistics setup, as extra storage is now unavailable for customers due to this demand. Now I'd like to move on to Australia, which the news is slightly better out of Australia, with the industrial action that was planned for Melbourne being halted recently in the last few days. The impact of these strikes has already seen a number of delays, and we're currently sitting at 4 to 5 days. But if these industrial actions continued, this would have been a lot worse and just not palatable coming into Christmas. Reefer and food grade equipment on all shipping lines in and out of Australia is very limited at the moment. FCL space and availability out of Melbourne and Sydney has improved greatly in the last couple of weeks, and our agents in Melbourne and Sydney are now back working in their offices, which is great. Also, I've noticed in the last week or so that air freight has been overbooked, particularly out of Melbourne to New Zealand, with delays of 1 to 2 weeks. Now, lastly, I'd like to move on to New Zealand, our local conditions here in New Zealand. In the last few days, strike action has been indicated by the Rail and Transport Union in New Zealand and will take place in December. This strike action has been targeted one day in the North Island and another day in the South Island at this stage. Rail transit times from the Port of Tauranga to Metro Port of Auckland have cleared for non-priority containers and improved. However, it is still taking an average of 7 to 10 days for them to transit from Tauranga to Auckland. Rail service schedules on the Tauranga to Auckland line, however, will also be impacted by the planned upgrade to the network over the Christmas period. So this is something that we need to bear in mind. Container depots in Auckland are also over capacity, which is adding delays in dehiring of empty containers and also causing additional costs. The volume of LCL shipments into New Zealand has increased largely due to the rules and regulations around level 3 in Auckland and the limited number of people who can unload containers. This has caused significant delays in unloading of the warehouses. Space is also very tight in these warehouses at the moment, with night shifts being forced to stop with unpacks due to no space being available until cargo is picked up the next day. This has resulted in unpacks of FCL containers, FAK containers, to take approximately 14 days from discharge in Auckland. Just a little insight on the export side of things. Export services remain heavily booked in most markets, with space availability taking 2 to 3 weeks in most cases. And again, congestion is a major issue in ports still ongoing with the transit. So allowing an extra few additional weeks in transit is a safe bet when talking to our customers with shipments that are transshipping through these ports. Lastly, I just want to say that the team here at 360 have been working incredibly hard over the last 12 to 18 months to secure bookings, come up with solutions, and keep our customers updated with recent developments in the market. As Patrick was talking earlier, we like to think outside the box and come up with something that's comes up with a solution for our customers. This is something that every single member of our team takes great pride in getting a solution for our customers. So they can be rest assured that we will get to the solution that they need. Patrick, have we got any questions that you'd like us to ask? I think you're muted, Patrick. All good.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So thank you, Blair and Priya, for that excellent presentation and all of that information. You know that I have a long history, long ago, with the shipping industry, so it's fascinating for me to hear all of the information and the price rises and which are impacting our businesses across the Hutt Valley. So there are a couple of questions, mostly about crystal ball gazing, probably, in terms of, what are your thoughts around when businesses might start to see, prices start to come down, and you did mention that a little bit, but when do you think they'll see prices starting to kind of stabilize or normalize, or if indeed they actually will?
Yeah, I'll just get out my crystal ball. That's a really tough question. We've heard a lot of rumors that once new vessels are introduced and more empty containers are made available, then possibly. But that's not going to happen for a while yet. I don't believe we're going to see pricing drop anytime soon. I'm hoping they're going to stabilize next year after Chinese New Year. But to be honest, all we noticed this year was that Chinese New Year and the effects of it just lasted so much longer, and import peak season started so much earlier. I can't see it improving anytime soon. Right.
Okay, cool. So you also talked about the possibility of shipping lines coming to, new shipping lines coming to Wellington. Could you talk a little bit about when that might happen, how you're working to influence those decisions?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Patrick. So we've reached out to these shipping lines and obviously put these questions to them. And also we work very closely with Centreport here with their management team to see where they are on those lines. Currently, there's no indication. They don't want to give us any forecast of when that's likely to happen. But we do remain hopeful with Littleton being introduced into the service. Even if Napier was to come into the picture, that would be a great benefit to Wellington.
Fantastic, good. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one. And look, the final question again is a little bit of a crystal ball kind of question. Is so, what would you be recommending to organisations that have traditionally shipped without any problems, but might now be thinking about waiting for prices to come down or stockpiling goods to ship later to their customers? What's your advice around those sorts of situations?
We would suggest to not hold off. Like I said, I don't believe it's going to get better anytime soon, but it's to make sure that you're aware of your costs. So shipping costs have gone up. We've talked about that a bit, but it's to make sure that clients are aware of what those costs are and factor those in. It's also really important to factor in longer lead times. So if you think that the shipping is 50 days, allow an extra 3 weeks at least. So it's definitely allowing those extra lead times as well.
Brilliant. And look, I guess finally, and I think I know the answer to this question, but Priya and Blair and the team at 360 Logistics, you're always available to have a conversation with existing customers or new customers to help them out. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. We're always available to chat. Come out and see, or come to our offices here, and we're always open to coming up with new solutions and things for customers as well.
Fantastic. So that's all the questions we have. Thank you again, Blair and Priya, for your time today and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with our audience. I know it's, as I said earlier, it is a big topic of conversation when I'm meeting businesses across the Hutt Valley, as you will know. But what I also know is that the team at 360 Logistics is very well respected by the businesses that deal with you. Your work and your innovation and your thinking to enable businesses to, access shipping, to get the best advice, to get different solutions, and to get ideas that might help them think about things differently, comes across very strongly when I'm talking to businesses. So, I'd encourage any other businesses to reach out to 360 and have a conversation with Blair and Priya about how they can help you as an organisation. So thank you again. This has been a really great informational webinar for us. We hope you get some value out of this, and thank you again to the team at 360 Logistics. And I think it's not too late too early to say wishing everybody a very happy holidays. It's been a long year, and I'm sure everybody will be welcoming a Christmas break. So happy Christmas, everybody, and thank you for joining us today.